The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Okay, so let's turn the page to storyboarding, which for us, no matter what sort of video you're doing, live action, animation, or some sort of combination, is vital to the process because, and here's why. It allows you basically a lot of freedom to not have to make any really high stakes creative decisions, and just sort of be creative at a very early stage. You don't have to commit to any sort of production at that point. That's why we do it, and it's why we share it with clients before we commit to doing any animation, because it's very time consuming for us to animate. And we want the client to know what we're doing before we commit to doing any of that really labor-intensive work. It serves as a blueprint for timing and visual flow, so you can get a sense of the pacing of the video, whether or not, as Elizabeth was saying, things are going to get stale at a certain point. It can help you make those sorts of creative decisions without having to commit a lot of resources. The storyboard can reveal, where you're going to need to shoot, what props you're going to need, the types of shots you're going to employ. All of that decision making gets made in the storyboarding process. And another really crucial thing is so often when we're doing a storyboard, we realize that the script needs to be different. You write something, maybe you have some visual sense when you're writing a script, and that's good because and I've done it a lot, so a lot of times I am thinking visually, but I'm not always thinking visually, and I'm not, it's not my strong suit all the time when I'm script writing. So a lot of times we'll be in a storyboard meeting, we'll say, well, this line is just sort of dumb, why don't we say this so that we can show this, so that integration of visual and oral, the voice, is a really crucial part of storyboarding, So that's why we storyboard. And let me just show you an example of one of our storyboards. There are many different ways to storyboard, but I'll just show you one example. The first is, I'll show you this storyboard for this video we did for NASA, actually, and it was produced by WNET in New York. And they asked us to create a series of videos about different physics topics, and this one is on centripetal force. So I'll just switch over to, let's see, episode. So this is essentially, this is our storyboard method. We do an Excel spreadsheet with 3 columns: shot, narrator, and notes. Very simple. Email me and I'll send you this, Tim. I'll send you this storyboard and you can use it in your own work if you want. Imagine you've got a tennis ball. So we start the shot on the tennis ball. We either pull back, we'll watch the video. I can't remember if the camera pulls back or we jump cut or something, attached to a piece of string. And we pull back further and you start swinging it. And then when did we have this idea for the dog? I mean, probably this came in the storyboard meeting, like, okay, well, we'll have this nice dog element to the experience. In circles. And so gradually the camera's getting further back, and now we can see the background. Whoa, now, watch out for your buddy. This is not for adults, by the way. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. This is for elementary and middle schoolers. So if you find this a little facile and dumb, just imagine you're 13 years old. watch out for your buddy. So the guy on the skateboard ducks down, and then he goes past and waves. Let's take, so we start with, my attitude about this in a lot of cases is to start with action, like start with something that's really compelling, like you don't have to start right away explaining things, just sort of start with imagining something or doing something. There's that old comment, I think this is Hemingway said this, he talked about in medias res, start in the middle of things. So don't start with elaborate sort of explanations. Just start like in the middle of the action. So something needs to be happening at the beginning of a video. So that's why we chose to start. You got this ball spinning. There's something going on. There's this dog. There's the kid skateboarding by. You're starting with a high level of engagement and interest. Let's take a closer look at the fascinating physics of this simple action. Okay, and then we go into the more detailed analysis of what's really going on. We talk about F equals ma, Newton's second law, and how it relates to objects moving. So I'm not going to show you the whole storyboard, but you start to get a sense of how we put this thing together visually in a very methodical way before we did any work. I mean, this is work, but before we did any, animation or illustration. And I think John did all the artwork for this, and it's very basic. She's basically a stick figure. John makes really nice stick figures, so he has that talent. So let me just show you the video, and it came out of that process. Hold on a second. Here we go. Whoops, that's not the right one. Here we go. This is a minute and 46. So our challenge was to do these topics in about a minute and a half, minute 45 seconds.
Imagine you've got a tennis ball attached to a piece of string, and you start swinging it in circles. Whoa now, watch out for your buddy. Let's take a closer look at the fascinating physics of this simple action. You've probably heard of Newton's second law of motion as it relates to objects moving in a straight line. Turns out, Newton's second law also tells us about the net force on an object as it moves in a circle. When an object moves in a circle, its velocity changes direction. Since the velocity is changing, that means we have an acceleration. And we know from Newton's second law that if we have an acceleration, we have a net force. Now back to our spinning ball. For objects undergoing circular motion, the net force on the object is called the centripetal force. It's a weird-sounding word, but it's Latin for the phrase center seeking. It's named centripetal because the centripetal force always points to the center of the circle. The ball has a tangential velocity, so if you suddenly cut the string, it would fly off in whatever the tangential direction was at the moment you made the cut. But assuming you don't cut the string and you keep swinging the ball's tangential velocity is constantly changing directions. This means the ball is accelerating, and the reason it's accelerating is due to the centripetal force. The centripetal force acting on the ball is constantly directing the ball towards the center of the circle, your hand. This, combined with the ball's velocity, keeps the ball swinging in a circle. The same centripetal force that keeps the tennis ball swinging in a circle also keeps roller coasters on the track as they go through a loop-de-loop. So the next time you're having a blast on a roller coaster, you can thank the centripetal force.
Okay, so so that's a pretty short little ditty, but I just wanted to show you how we built it. This next thing is, I'm not going to show the whole thing, but it's interesting. This is a video, a sort of an insider look at how Pixar does their storyboarding. And I'll just play a little bit of it, and then perhaps you can watch the whole thing on your own time.
All right, so this section is the storyboarding process. And this is where, instead of writing with words, we write with drawings, and we put them on little pieces of paper, and it's sort of seeing the movie in comic book form. And we'll do a section of a movie at a time, and we'll pin them all up on boards, And then when we get a certain chunk done, we'll show them to the directors, or they will show them to us. And I don't know, it's kind of a complicated
Well,
thing
you
to
know, that was a
explain.
really good description of it, but how better to describe
Something better than that.
Yeah.
Well, we could show it.
Yeah, let's show it.
With storyboards.
With storyboards. Okay. This is the storyboarding process as illustrated by Joe Rampt, our head of story.
Yes. So there's the little cute Mr. Storyboard artist working very diligently and happily in January.
And he has a deadline. He's working hard to do his sequence. Every time he does a drawing, he pins it up on the board. And there he stands back when he gets done with his sequence and he says, did I do it the best way? And storyboarding actually balances like composition, cutting, staging, acting, writing, everything that goes through the storyboard artist's mind as he's doing it.
So he'll try another pass at it a couple more times until he feels he's got it just right.
Just right.
It's perfect.
So he calls in the story department
And the
of
directors.
course the director.
There you can see John Lasher. Looks just like it.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Thanks, Joe.
And then Joe, or whoever's pitching, well, the little storyboard artist in this case, will pitch the sequence. And in the middle of the pitch, John gets an idea.
We all get ideas. And that's one of the great things about storyboarding here at Pixar is that it is a free-for-all once we get in this. And everybody is out coming up with ideas to make the sequence better, to make the film better. And when the pitch session is done, inevitably there is lots of ideas to make the sequence better. The storyboard artist kind of wakes up from it.
Right.
Usually
We're infamous for putting all our notes on little Post-its.
Yeah.
That's why you see all the little yellow squares there. And so we'll all leave all excited about the great new ideas we've got. Boom. And we leave the storyboard artist.
Mr. Storyboard artist goes back and thinks about it and starts over with all of his notes that he has to do. Joe Rampt often calls it the storyboarding process, not storyboarding, but story reboarding.
Yep.
Because we work on it, redo it to make each sequence, to make the entire film as best as we possibly can be. In the next section, you're going to see Joe Rampt, our head of story on A Bug's Life, pitching to co-director Andrew Stanton.
Me.
And I think Bob's in there too.
I think Bob Peterson, one of our story guys.
He's pitching the circus sequence from A Bug's Life. Enjoy.
Okay, so Slim and Francis are hit by the spotlight. They're not too excited. And Slim says, tra-la-la-la-la, spring is in the air and I'm a flower with nothing interesting to say. And then they go, ah, look, a bee. And then Heimlich comes running forward. I am a cute little bumblebee. Here I come. I want to catch up with your flowers.
Oh my God, I gotta. What if it's like he just can't catch up? He's like, it's just, he's so heavy, it's just hard for him to like catch up to Slim.
Slow down, you.
Yeah. Right.
So he's like, you flowers, slow down. I'm trying to catch up with you. Oh, yeah,
Right.
That would be great. You flowers are too fast. You're running too fast. Slow down, you guys.
That's great.
Okay, that'd be good. Okay, so then he's chasing after him, and Heimlich runs by the stands, and there's this little kid eating candy corn, and he stops, and he goes, turns around, and he goes, oh, candy corn, here. You have to let me eat it. Oh, and his stomach is rumbling, and
Yeah, he can go, let me help you. Let me help you to finish it.
oh, so
Wait a minute, is a candy corn funny?
we're thinking of red vines.
Would red vines be fun? Yeah, that's a little bit tough
'Cause,
for
you
a
know,
fly to hold.
There's those little sombrero juju bees. Those are kind of funny.
The question is, what would a fly like as far as candy goes?
Well, dots, but we already have a character. named
Candy
Dot.
corn's pretty funny though, because it's really like it's a big triangle. I think that's
Okay.
actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we should go with candy corn. It's like, is it too Halloween?
Nah.
No, okay. So he goes, oh, candy corn, here, let me help you to finish it.
Great.
Okay.
That's great.
Tra-la-la-la-la, spring's in the air, and I'm a flower with nothing interesting to say. A bee!
I am a cute little bumblebee. Here I come. Slow down, you flowers. Oh, candy corn. Here, let me help you to finish it.
So they obviously went with the candy corn. Anyway, go ahead.
Storyboard that came from Science Out Loud.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sorry, I totally forgot that I had this.
Okay,
Not to.
no problem.
Sorry, Josh.
No problem. Here.
Thanks. Because we've been seeing all these very gorgeous storyboards. Like even you guys talk about how like it's not when the real work starts, but obviously that takes a lot of time and talent. So this was a storyboard that Ashley did for our very first episode of Science Out Loud, just to show you how basic it can be and still be effective. So she did an episode on exoplanets, Ashley's K-12 video. Woo! And what we discovered after she storyboarded this, she's talking about a very abstract cosmic topic, so obviously we can't go into space, which made deciding what the visuals were going to be surprisingly difficult, or maybe it should have been unsurprising, but we were noobs at the time, so it was hard. But she's literally just drawing stick figures, aligning them with her text. And when we were looking at the storyboard, we were like, wow, there's not really a whole lot going on except for her just standing there. And basically half of the video was going to be an animation without her on screen. And there would have been no way for us to really anticipate the extent to which she was missing from screen until she storyboarded this out for us. And so she tweaked not only her visuals, but she ended up tweaking her script a lot after she did this to sort of make room for scenes in which she could be more present, where it could be more than a fully animated video. But in case you wanted to see, we actually kept the first 6 sort of frames pretty similar to her original plan. And we just tried to alter the animations to make it a little more engaging. So I'll show you the first part of her video.
This rock can absorb.
So this was this animation was actually done by our first editor.
25 years ago, most people would have told you that there are only 9 planets in the universe. Since then, we've lost one. Sorry, Pluto. But we've discovered thousands of others. So what happened? Did astronomers suddenly get a new pair of glasses? And now we're meeting all of our new neighbors? Well, no. It turns out we could have seen these exoplanets all along, but we only recently figured out exactly where and how to look. We call these new planets exoplanets, or...
So because we knew what she wanted to do with the animations ahead of time because of her storyboard, that allowed us to direct her while we were shooting to put her hands down, to look up at the ceiling, and do all that stuff. And I'll show you one more storyboard that was done a little bit differently, and then I'll let Josh talk again. But Alex actually just did pictures for some of them. So he did an episode on how carbon nanotubes are made, and he had this sort of imagine a blank opening. And so he just took pictures of the locations and types of places that he wanted to go. And then from there, he literally just drew stick figures. So you don't have to draw anything crazy beautiful. No offense to Alex. But this was actually very helpful for us as well to sort of see how the pacing of his demos were going to go. So we altered his script again after he made this because we sort of realized that it was a lot of just him sitting at a table demoing things. And we decided that there needed to be something a little more visually engaging besides him just at a table. But he's talking about how a thread made out of carbon nanotubes could lift up something as heavy as an elephant. We quickly realized that we wouldn't have footage for that. But this is sort of, again, really basic, nothing too crazy, but helped us a lot in the planning of the video. So I'll show you the first couple bits of his.
Imagine a material that would let you use your phone for weeks without a charge, or would let you build an elevator to space! These elevators and batteries could one day exist with a material called carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes are tiny. Take this human hair, for example. You need 10,000 carbon nanotubes to make a rope as big as this hair. Despite being small, they're really strong. This cotton string holds up this Lego car fine, but if it was made from carbon nanotubes, it could hold up a real car.
So originally he was going to talk about this model of carbon nanotubes at the very beginning of the video, but after we saw the storyboard, we thought that we should wait until later on to explain it and just hit them with this example first. So just wanted to show you guys that so you knew that your storyboards don't have to be anything super complicated.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, let's see. All right, so we're almost done with this, by the way. But some quick tips for storyboarding. And I guess this was something that Elizabeth was just saying. It doesn't have to be a work of art. Stick figures work. Focus on details that matter. We don't draw a lot of backgrounds, or we just draw the bare minimum of elements that will get across the intention of the scene, or the shot, rather. Should include a composition and camera angles. You know, is this a wide shot? Is it a close-up? What is you might make a note about what the camera's doing. Is it pulling back? Is it on a dolly? Is it tracking something?
And just so you guys know, since we haven't really talked about that stuff yet,
yeah.
That's a lot of stuff that Chris is going to talk about tomorrow.
Cool.
So I would suggest that you try to keep that stuff in mind, and then maybe revisit it again after Chris talks about it tomorrow too.
Yeah.
And you can also ask him while he's here too. It's okay.
Right.
No, I'm not. Of course.
It's okay if we have like spoilers in the class.
Yeah.
You can move a little forward.
And Chris knows the grammar of this stuff better than I do. I admit I didn't go to film school, so we use terms of art, in our studio that probably aren't appropriate. But the camera's close up on this guy. The camera's far back from this guy. The camera's moving while this guy is talking. That sort. Any of that stuff. Don't be constrained by, Right.
What about aspect ratio of like the paper that you're using in the shot that you're going to
Yeah.
use? 8.5 by 11 turned sideways, like awesome,
Yeah.
or is there another shortcut that's
Yeah.
helpful?
Well, a note card is turned sideways is perfect. Is a good 16 by 9 approximation. The template that I'm going to give you guys is widescreen. But yeah, definitely have to think about those sorts of things. You don't want to be doing it in a 4x3 box. You want to think about the full frame. And this is sort of stupid. I don't know why I put this. Make them easy to read visually and understand. So, I think one thing I wanted to really stress is that for us, and I think for most people, as you saw in the Pixar video, storyboarding is a collaborative process. So, you can't. This is a process. This kind of art is something that comes out of a lot of different minds working together creatively, and so one reason to make the storyboard really easy to understand is that somebody else is going to have to use it and work on it. It's not just what's inside your head. This is a part of a process that collaborators are all working on, so it has to communicate very effectively.
And I haven't mentioned this formally yet, but obviously if you're going to be hosting your video, you can't simultaneously be shooting it as well. So the way that's going to work is we'll partner you guys up, or we'll figure something out to where basically you'll be shooting someone else's video and someone else will be shooting yours. And the storyboard is going to be really important for that reason, because you have to somehow give the instructions to whoever's shooting for you exactly how you want things framed, what you want your shot to look like, and things like that. So agree completely. It's a very collaborative and necessary thing.
Yeah. If there's time, make a few boards. Like a lot of times, people in our office will make some boards independently of each other, and then we'll bring them all together and see what we've all got. Sometimes that's part of our workflow. If you have time, storyboard the same script in a couple of different ways. You might get different ideas with different perspectives. And as I said before, revise the script as needed. Sometimes a great visual idea doesn't line up with the script. Focus on visual story, not adherence to your script. So if you come up with a cool idea, and you may, this is hard to, I can say this, but you just have to experience it to really understand it. You might come up with a cool idea, but the script doesn't quite match what you're saying. So don't feel like you're locked into that script. And finally, the storyboard is only a guide. Changes are often made in the production and editing process. So all of this stuff is very plastic. You're moving it, you're changing it as you go. All right. So how to make a storyboard? We brought some paper templates. You can use note cards. We don't use note cards, but it's actually an interesting idea, which is that then if you put one scene or one shot on each card, you can start moving the cards around on the wall, which might be an interesting way to do it. And each frame should include the script line and basic direction notes. We don't always do that, but we at minimum we include the script line that's coordinated with with the shot. So let's workshop, and there's a couple different ways we can do this. Well, first let me go over what I think this basic format. John and I will sit up here and storyboard a script. And what that script is, I want to talk to you about in a minute. And then once we've done some of it, maybe over 30, 45 minutes, we'll break you into small groups and you'll continue the same script, storyboarding it. You'll do some frames on your own. We'll walk around and help you. And then you guys will present what you have, and we'll just share and discuss them. Yeah?
Josh, how do you feel about using PowerPoint for storyboarding?
That works. That would work great.
That would be a better tool. Probably
Yeah, sure.
That's what Ashley did. She made hers on PowerPoint.
Yeah, that would work great. Keynote, PowerPoint, that'd be great. And you don't have to use these paper sheets, but unless you have a Wacom with you, it can be difficult to draw on your computer. The script that we're going to storyboard, we can either do a script that we've already done, or that we've already written and storyboarded and produced, but it would be wonderful to storyboard it again with all of your input. Or we can take one script that you guys are currently working on and just get started on it with you. So either someone is either a victim or very lucky, or some combination of the two in this. Who votes for storyboarding one of our scripts? Okay, somebody, okay. Who votes? Okay, so fine. So it sounds like you want to storyboard one of your scripts.
Might not raise their hand for that either. We've got a quiet crew.
All right, who wants to storyboard one of their scripts? Oh, come on, guys. This is absurd.
I confirm mine is trivial, but the one I showed you yesterday is that.
Oh, you mean the hotel one?
Yeah, because it's shorter.
Yeah,
so.
do you have, should we just storyboard the latest script that you uploaded to the Tumblr?
The one I showed you yesterday. I have not written a
so he's got an idea that he hasn't fully scripted yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It might be easier if we have actual text to align.
Yeah, we
with
need
it,
a script
just
for sure.
For logistical purposes. Does anyone have?
Yeah.
It's not going to be your entire script. It's just going to be a portion, a couple scenes from it. Does anyone feel comfortable? And it's okay if you end up changing it completely too.
Yeah.
Can we do enough of one that you've already done? Because it might also be, I mean, I'm just thinking from a learning perspective, it might be really interesting also to match that with what you are actually ended up doing.
Yeah, and I thought that too. That was kind of what we were planning to do, but I didn't want to make it all about us. But if you think it's instructive, then.
I think that might be nice to have a
okay.
framework for everyone.
Okay.
Else is talking up, I might as well.
Okay, cool. So I do have a script here.
Do you guys all have pencils, or should
I have pens. I brought pens.
Pens. Do you want them to do pen or pencil?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Pencil's nice because you can erase it. Yeah. So I think what we'll do is we'll start off. with John working, and then we'll chime in, and then you can see how John works, and then you can do it yourself. Does that make sense? Yourselves. I have the script actually, so you can see what I was hoping we'd do. This is a video, another one of those WNET episodes on mass and force. I hope I printed out enough of these. I may not have.
You can share.
Okay. Some people are going to have to share, unfortunately. Okay, so John, we use Flash a lot just for illustration and for storyboarding and for some animation components. I won't go into all that. But what John has here is a Wacom tablet, and it allows us to just get our ideas into the computer, basically. So I need the script.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. You can share this.
All right. So let's just focus on the first paragraph, okay? And in order for this to work, please chime in and participate in this process. Because what will end up happening is we'll end up with exactly the same thing we already did, and I don't want to do that. Mass is a measure of an object's ability to resist being accelerated by a force. That means the more massive an object is, the harder it is to make it move if it's at rest, or to stop it if it's moving. So, so thinking about the need to make the beginning of a video very interesting and to immediately engage a viewer, how do we want to start this one?
Maybe somebody being pulled by a force and they're trying very hard to resist.
Okay. Mass is a measure of an object. So we've got an object. What kind of object do we want? Huh? A fat man. Something big, something iconic, something that really symbolizes mass. A building, a monument. How about, what were you going to say, Josh?
I was thinking of just the word mass, but in some kind of like look of a stone.
Uh-huh.
Like a big stone that says mass.
Okay, that could work.
It falls down and there's dust.
Okay.
A brass weight.
A brass weight. Yeah. An anvil. Those are iconic things. Yeah.
A one-ton thing that gets dropped on someone's head.
Yeah, that would be the Looney Tunes approach for sure. Okay, so what do you think, John? Should we go with something big that falls? Is a good. Do we need the word mass on the screen? Okay.
Something big that falls.
Superhero.
Superhero could work.
Why don't we do the? Let's try out this idea of the word mass being made out of stone. That's kind of interesting. It falls and like crumbles, kind of like creates this sort of cloud of dust and stuff.
That sounds good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How many number of storyboards do you need for every one of your ideas? Like, to what detail do we need to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do you think about that, John?
I think that's up to you. I mean, I'm a very visual person, so for me, I'd like to draw maybe 3 or 4 frames of this mass dropping down. But for you, maybe you could just make one drawing and next to the storyboard, explain the action, explain what's going on.
Yeah. A lot of times we draw red arrows to indicate movement. So you could draw the word mass at the bottom of the screen with the clouds and have a red arrow facing down.
I mean, there's no right answer. This is really for your benefit and for the benefit of whoever's going to be filming it for you.
Yeah.
So
We definitely go the more rudimentary route in general.
Yeah.
But whatever would make you feel most comfortable. I think a rule of thumb, like the bare minimum, is that anytime you're changing the scene, like you're changing the camera angle or you're changing the location, you definitely want to do another board for that.
And John is drawing in like just a horizon here, so you have a sense of the scene just at a very basic level, and where you know where the background is going to be and where the word is going to land. And I think that's enough for the first line.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning too. A lot of times with our storyboards, we'll just draw our ideas, and then we'll come to the end of the whole storyboard and take a look at it. And we'll say, oh, we have this ending, but it doesn't really match with the beginning. So then we go back and maybe we change the beginning to more match the end, you know. We're just getting all our ideas out. But you're not locked into this idea now that we've drawn it.
Right. Okay. So next line. That means the more massive an object is, the harder it is to make it move if it's at rest or to stop it if it's moving. And that, yeah. So what do you think about that one? We've got this object that's fallen onto the screen, and now we're talking about moving it and stopping it. Yeah.
I think of a person who's like kind of doing like the whole pushing against it.
Yeah.
Kind of the legs are moving, but they're not going anywhere.
I think that's a natural, very, very iconic way of doing that. So we have a character now who comes in and, you know, like this, oh God, you know, is trying to push this thing.
I think that for the second portion, when the thing slants, then the mess will come sliding onto the guy. He has to try to stop it, but he can't. So he's like pinned to the wall by the mess.
Okay. What if this little guy tries to push it, and then maybe an elephant comes on the other side of the word and pushes and is effective at pushing it towards him, and then he has to like go like this to get it to, he's like, oh my God, and he can't stop it, and he gets pushed off the screen, something like that. Would that?
How about the screen tilts?
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, so then it's gravity is working on the word, then that could work.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Trevor's machine's a little different
Uh,
than mine.
I feel like we should have the soundtrack on or something.
Yeah, he tries to get out of the way. Okay, great. So that covers the first paragraph for me. Are you guys, you think this is a good start? So let's start with the next sentence. Are you all set?
Yep.
Okay. The nifty thing about mass is that it doesn't necessarily have to do with size. think of a big pile of rocks and a big pile of feathers. Both piles are the same size or volume, but it would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks than it would to move the pile of feathers. The reason? Rocks have more mass than feathers because they're more dense. All right, so how do we tackle this one?
You like hammer this big mass thing and it just breaks into a bunch of rocks.
Okay, cool. Maybe
I don't know if you want to go away from the mass thing, but if you want to keep it, then just
that's nice. Well, I like the idea of making it cohesive. You know, like it's all it's all working together. So maybe the mass slides down the ramp and hits something and breaks apart into a pile of rocks. So there's a pile of rocks on one side of this screen. What's that?
And it's a bird, and we've got the feathers.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's an interesting idea.
then you have a pile of feathers, a pile of rocks.
Oh, so this character's a bird?
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got organically our rocks and our feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I have a clarification question. So, in the script, is it that the guy's running away from the mass, or should he push back on the mass when it starts to fall? Oh, I guess he's doing that in the first frame. So.
He's pushing against it, and then it starts. Then things tilt, and it starts to slide forward.
He gives up because.
Yeah, but is somebody suggesting that this guy's a bird?
Yes.
Okay. So how are we going to do this in a kind of fun, non-violent way? That this bird, like, you know.
How else could you get feathers, right? If we're not going to kill a bird, like there's pillows, right? There's like how else do you get a big pile of feathers?
Well, I mean, they could just sort of divinely appear, like they could just fall from the top of the screen, you know. But
someone could walk on screen with a wheelbarrow full of rock, dump it, and then carry on a bag of feathers that's about the same volume.
Yeah. And let me back up for a second, because let's think about this in terms of, so this first scene, obviously, we're talking about animation here. Like, we're not going to do this live action, right? But let's imagine that the next scene, this second paragraph, is live action. So then we're talking about more of like an idea like you have, you know, where you have some actual people moving rocks around, and you have maybe somebody dumping out feathers, right? Is that what we want to do? Is kind of a combo here? I know I'm maybe.
Or maybe bringing that into mind. Maybe then the narrator or whoever comes in, and then the mess word falls into his hand. He crushes it, and you can see then it's like he puts it on the table, it's stacked over the.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about a nice transition between. That could be interesting.
Or you could do overlay to the transition.
Yeah, with the overlay.
That person in the middle as the mass falls down next to him or her and creates a rock pile, and then.
Yeah. So then we have a.
Feathers pop up or something.
Yeah. So then we have a host at the throughout. We start with a host, a talking head, and then we have the mass fall down beside him. You see how this gets complicated, right? There's lots of different ways to do things, right? Well, for the sake of simplicity, let's continue as if we're just going to animate this video. Okay? Is that okay with you, Elizabeth?
Oh, absolutely not. No, of course.
Okay. Just so that you guys get the sense of the process, but you can already see that there are so many options, right? There's so many different ways to do things. Okay, so back to our feathers. The nifty thing about mass is that it doesn't necessarily have to do with size. All right, so we've got this mass that's rolled down the hill, and I like the idea of it hitting something and turning into a pile of rocks. Are we going to go with that idea? Okay, yeah, it goes off a cliff.
If you hit a pillow factory, you could have
A pillow factory. That's funny.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so here we have our cliff. And this will this action will cover the nifty thing about mass. And then down in the valley or the canyon is the Acme Pillow Company.
I've seen this video, so it's really interesting to see how different this one is. I really like this one.
Pillows are us. Okay. So we've got to think of a big pile of rocks and a big pile of feathers. Boom.
So then maybe we cut.
Then we cut to a pile. We cut to a pile of rocks and a pile of feathers. So this is kind of a jump cut to a close-up.
Just imagine these feathers.
Both piles are the same size or volume, but it would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks than it would to move the pile of feathers. So maybe our protagonist, our little guy who was holding the mass thing needs to come back in here. What should he do now? Yeah, we could do it that way. Wind is.
With like a broom or something because it's a mess.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah. Or maybe any other ideas?
If you want the protagonist, you could like take wind with like a leaf blower. Something where it just blows off the feathers off the screen.
Yeah.
Blow the rocks.
That could work. Yeah.
Like adding on to that, maybe he tries to blow the rocks and nothing happens. Then he kicks it and he injures his own toe.
Yeah. So what do we have? We have a leaf blower. We have a cleaning up scenario. You want to try the leaf blower?
Sure.
Or anything else?
Is there any way we can connect this with the beginning? In the beginning, he's trying to move this word mass. Is there anything there? Is he maybe, the janitor, and this mass is in his way. He doesn't like it there. And then he's trying to do the same thing here. He's trying to clean up this mess. I don't know, just spitballing here. Is there a way we can tie the two things together is the question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was thinking that he's running because he's running away from the mess. So he runs and along with the mess and he crashes and boom, he lands in the feathers. He's like getting away from the feathers. He's clearing the feathers. Then he tries to clear the rocks.
That's an interesting. So what does it say here? Think of a big pile of rocks and a big pile of feathers. Both piles are the same size or volume, but it would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks than it would to move the pile of feathers. So I think we're back to a scenario where we need to have some sort of we need to show force being exerted. So it would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks. So how can we show that? I mean, we've almost already showed it in a way. Yeah, or maybe just our character, trying to push this pile of rocks again. It's like, oh man, not again, I gotta push something else.
I'm wondering if he should have a backpack, because a student comes up.
What's that?
We're heading towards having a student, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he's our student.
Right.
And that we identify him
He's on his way to school or something. And this adventure happens. Yeah. Yeah, and the audience is kids. You know, this is middle schoolers. Yeah. So we could add a note, you know, to the first scene that like, kid with backpack. Okay. So we agree that, so this kid is going to try to move these rocks in some way. Maybe he's trying to push them or gets his back up against them and tries to get him out of the way.
Okay. I like the idea on like there's a cleanup crew, so there'll be two different kinds of equipment will be used. One would be like could be a vacuum cleaners on the right to clear the feathers.
Yeah.
Or someone sweeping at one of them, and the rocks will be this like construction truck. Then it comes in and lifts it up.
Yeah, yeah. Does that really just show the notion of differing amounts of force being required?
That's a good question. Maybe less likely.
Yeah.
Applies to.
Maybe we use the heavy machinery to move the rocks, and then we just move our little character, and he can move the feathers.
Yeah, that could work. Yeah, like a big backhoe has to move the rocks, but the character is able to just either blow on the feathers or move them out of the way really easily. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. Does that work? Does that sell it, as we say? So we need to show that do we need to show the backhoe first? It would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks, and then we have another shot, than it would to move the pile of feathers. Backhoe file. Yeah. We see the rocks gone in the next scene.
Here they're gone.
Yeah. Okay, so the feathers are gone. And then we've got another line here. The reason? Rocks have more mass than feathers because they're more dense.
Maybe like have a scale with like the backhoe with the rocks on it, and if you got feathers on or something. That'd be decent.
Yeah.
That's why those like, you know,
Right, right. I'm not a scientist, and you guys can help me with this, but does density really equate to weight? Like, if we just show them on a scale, does that really showing that one is more dense than the other?
I mean, it's indirect. So
Yeah,
I think a better
right.
way would be to like address the density.
Yeah.
Like directly.
Yeah. Could we do something like just very simple where we just, the character extends two hands, and one hand is a rock, and then the other is a feather, and we just and we put the words "more dense" above the hand with the rock in it, or something like that. How do you visually say something's more dense? Like, how do you show that visually?
The tractor thingy or whatever that heavy machine was, they could throw the rocks off into the ocean, and you see the rocks sinking, and then the feathers are just floating in the air, maybe just landing on the surface of the water.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it definitely shows density. As in, I'm not sure how familiar the kids were with the concept of density. So,
yeah.
But having the water sinking, floating, maybe it will bring the point a bit better.
Okay. Well, you already introduced volume, so I feel like to introduce density wouldn't really be doing like what came before, which is volume. I don't think it would do it justice, like, because density is volume and mass. So if you were able to have volume and then go to mass after that, I think that's where they connect. That the mass can be different, even though the volume is the same, and you can still have different densities.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing is that the video isn't really about density. The video is about mass and acceleration.
Yeah.
So it may not even be, and like this is sacrilege, but it may not even be that important to really define what density is in this particular video, which is why maybe it's okay to just say one's more dense than the other, right? So it's like a, couple minute video, so.
Yeah.
The point is really about how things that have more mass require more force. If you start going into density, I'm afraid that people would also want to talk about what the difference between weight and mass are,
Yeah,
too.
true. Yeah.
So again, it's like, at what point are you branching off too much from the main point of the video and the main point of the story?
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, the reason rocks have more mass than feathers because they're more dense. Yeah, so maybe I don't remember what we did in the video we actually ended up producing, but I think I would go with the hand sort of displaying the two things. You sort of think about how they're essentially the same size, but one is very light and one is this rock. You know, it's dense.
Can you is it possible to sort of zoom in on the rock and because density is really that there's like more stuff per space, right? So somehow like have the rock bulge a little bit to show that that frame is like stuffed with as much stuff as possible.
Yeah.
And then show the feathers and show like a lot more air and space in between the feathers. And you can still put the label more dense, but maybe there'd be some sort of visual cue associated with that as well.
Yeah, potentially. This is a toughie.
So you're saying maybe we cut to a new shot where we see a rock and a feather side by side, and then maybe we see like a view of each one under a microscope?
Almost, but again, I don't know if that's distracting too much from the main point of the story.
Well, I like that idea, the microscope image. Like we show like the crystalline structure of the rock is like really, you know, it's like a lot of stuff packed in there.
What if you use poking? So you can't poke a rock, but maybe he takes out a pencil and he can put it through the feather. We can do that.
I think it's too complicated to go with this concept. It's like, I don't know, the word dense, like, I don't know if we have to explain that right now.
Yeah, well, let's think of another strategy here. How necessary do you think this line is in the script? I mean, is it vital to the script itself? I mean, to the whole story? I don't know. I haven't given you guys a chance to read the whole thing, but maybe this is one of those moments where we take this line out and we end the paragraph with moving the feathers.
That's far easier.
Yeah, it is easier, and it might be one of those moments where this line is a distraction from the.
I think that's where we're struggling right now.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say, okay, we're going to remove this line for now, and you know, some client is going to come to you and say, well, why did you guys take that line out? You know, we really need that, and then you have to argue for that. That's all part of the process, right? Like, well, we talked about this for about an hour, and we realized that this wasn't really important to the process, you know.
Well,
and that.
Do you feel like you have to, like, you have an artistic vision of what the project should be?
It happens all the time, yeah. Yeah, in my professional opinion, and that's when I have to sort of fake this professional persona. We don't think you should have this line in the script. And in retrospect, this line is in the video, but we didn't have 15 people to talk about it with. We only had 4.
But do you see how, like, are people okay with taking that line out now? Like, you see why maybe that's a good choice? Would you have reacted that positively to the idea of taking this out maybe 5 days ago before we had gone through this class? Because I feel like that is the reaction of a lot of scientists. Like, wait, you know, this is accurate, but it's not precise, like George was talking about. You know, you have to talk about density. And that's sort of I want to tie this back to the work that you guys are doing now. You guys see how this process is like really making you examine what is truly necessary and what isn't to the project, right? Because this is going to happen to your scripts too. You're going to sit down and storyboard, and you're going to rack your brain over one sentence that you can't think of an appropriate visual for, and maybe that's a cue for you to reconsider whether or not that part is truly vital. But you're not forced to do that until you think about things like storyboarding and think about things like an overall narrative to your video. Because otherwise you're going to do what most scientists do, and I like say this as a former amateur one, but like the tendency is to just throw as much information out there to cover your grounds, right?
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, this script was a lot more complicated. We received a kind of rough script from the client, and I had to edit it down and get it into something that worked, you know, for the medium, and we had some discussions about, well, why can't we say that? I mean, that exactly what you're talking about happened. And I think that this one just sort of slipped through, you know, this one got through, and in retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have produced that line. But I love that we're thinking about this. You know, I think this is a really important part of the process.
It just goes back to the whole concept. I mean, the core number one thing is, you know, your audience, right? Like, think about your audience. And
yeah.
I was actually earlier today helping one of my graduate fellows apply for the Masters in Journalism program here. And she has to write a 500-word piece on a science topic. And she was trying her hardest to consolidate an experiment, right? And she was trying to think about what the lay audience cares about. And it was so hard for her. And she distilled it down to like 2.5 sentences. But I told her even that was too much for like the New York Times piece, that no one cares about which mice were chosen and why for this experiment. And that this is the crux of like what I think is one of the hardest things.
Right. Well, and there was, I think on Monday we heard the phrase "kill your darlings." You know, there's that. You know.
That'll come back next week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and kind of, and I think in retrospect, introducing the notion of density into this is a real distraction. You know, it's not what this is about. So. Yeah, so I would say let's strike that line, that we have the luxury of doing that. So I want to stop there with our portion of it, and then kind of let you guys break up into groups and do maybe the next 2 paragraphs. If you make it further, that's fine. And then we'll walk around and kind of talk to you about your ideas. But so how many of us are there? There's 7? 8? Okay, so that is nice, 2 groups of 4. Yeah, I'll let you divide up however you want. If you just want to go with you 4 over here and then you 4 over here is fine. You guys from this, are you guys, I would say, you know, not all three of you guys together because you know each other and all that. But yeah, let's get started with that.
And if you guys need to take a break from the bathroom, this is a wonderful opportunity to do that.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Let's take a break before you start. Thank you.
The student just standing there, so you could have a teacher come in. Yeah, and I guess they sit down and it's like these different people.
You can actually use Elizabeth and me.
Latin behind a word, you're like, oh, that's why we use that word, right? I don't know.
They sort of like blow up.
But they're real people.
Stuff them inside their shirt, and now they're, you know, they're really big.
People read a press release about a product that there hasn't been in there. So what do you guys got? Is this thing on? Sorry. All right. Hot mic. All right.
So for the third paragraph, it says
yeah.
to show how. Picture a student and a teacher. So we have a student and a teacher. So the student is like really happy, and then the teacher is like, you know, because he has to do this exercise with you. I guess probably find rather name for it. And then it zooms out, and they say they're sitting on a chair. So you show this shot with them sitting on a chair. And I haven't drawn the last one yet, but it's supposed to show from like the a corner angle where you see the student being very small, like, and then the teacher will be like massive, to show the difference in this.
So you do the classic thing where you have an above shot for the student and a from the bottom for the teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're sitting in the chairs.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
I guess that stops for the third paragraph.
Yeah, I mean that's enough. I mean, it sounds like you guys went further than that,
Yeah,
but
we went further than that.
okay. Go ahead and share it.
Okay.
I'd be curious to see.
So. Yeah. So then he just pushes him off, but I guess he wants a little bit of comical. So it's still from the side, but because it's those rolly chairs with the spinny things, so the kid will go wee, you know, kind of like spins into the distance. But there's this little line in, like they will put over to show like there's a difference between them.
Okay. Cool. I like where that's going. That sounds cool. Did you guys have any just thoughts or feelings about the process? Like, does this give you a sense of like what it's really like to do this stuff and like have to run these scenarios through your brain and visualize them?
I think like the big thing we found was you have this text, but like knowing how to read it. So like we just with that first student teacher like read it like picture student and teacher, like that's just if we have a frame of a student, frame of a teacher, we'd have to slow that down, so that'd be like picture a student, now picture a teacher.
Right. So you're thinking about directorial sort of things, like how you're gonna, how the voiceover is gonna change as a result of these visual decisions you're making. Yeah, that's cool. You guys? It sounded like there was less of a hum going on over here. Did you guys? What do you have for that third paragraph?
Well, basically, you have the kid that's standing there from the last part, you know, when feathers have been swept away.
Yeah.
And the teacher walks up with two rolly chairs.
Okay, cool.
You sit down. There's a poof of smoke, and that's when it transitions to the live action.
Oh, okay. I like that. That's a cool idea.
And the teacher grows also. That's
Yes.
how we show she's massive.
Oh, the teacher grows. And this is. How are you going to grow the teacher?
Stuff her with pillows.
Oh, that's funny. So like maybe a stop action, where you take a frame, and then you put one more pillow in her. You take another frame, and you get like maybe, and then you do between frames, and you've got like maybe 30 or 60 frames of this teacher getting bigger and bigger. That could be really funny. Good idea. Any thoughts about the process?
What was the hardest part? What do you see?
how to make it visually engaging, I guess.
Yeah.
So have enough interesting shots, but not too much.
Yeah, true. It's like that fine line, right? You don't want to overdo it. It really boils down to this kind of empathy for the viewer, right? For their ability to understand things, and for maintaining this balance between your desire to have them engaged and their need to understand, and kind of threading that line.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more during our editing lecture, and Chris will talk about it tomorrow, but visual pacing is another thing that storyboarding can show you. So again, about like balancing between this line, if you have so many shots that are just changing too quickly, I mean, it can be a very sort of nauseating experience for the viewer, and I'm going to show you guys a rough cut of one of the videos that we made where that happened. It just felt too rapid, so we slowed it down visually too.
Okay, that's a really good point. Two last really small things. We didn't get to talk about After Effects, but it's essentially a piece of software that lets you layer video and artwork on top of each other in time. You know, I'm sure Elizabeth will talk a little bit about it, but if you want to email me and you have a specific thing you want to animate and you want some advice about how to do it, feel free. You can come by the studio and say, hey, I've got this problem, how would I animate this? We can give you some tips about how you would go about doing it.
And just so you guys know, again, you have free access to Linda, but there's a computer lab next to 26100, the new media center, and all the Macs are outfitted with Final Cut Pro, After Effects, the entire Adobe Creative Suite, and you guys have access to it at any point in time. So if you're interested in playing with that software or going in the media center, just let me know.
Is After Effects available from IS&T?
It is if you're installing it on a machine that MIT owns. I can ask you about maybe getting a license for you guys just for this class.
You can also just sign up on Adobe and get a month free trial of all the Adobe Creative Suite things. So you can just sign up with any email and download the programs you need.
And then the last thing I wanted to do is just show you the video that we actually ended up producing for this script. So. Here we go.
Mass is a measure of an object's ability to resist being accelerated by a force. That means the more massive an object is, the harder it is to make it move if it's at rest, or to stop it if it's moving. The nifty thing about mass is that it doesn't necessarily have to do with size. Think of a big pile of rocks and a big pile of feathers. Both piles are the same size, or volume, but it would take a lot more effort or force to move the pile of rocks than it would to move the pile of feathers. The reason? Rocks have more mass than feathers because they're more dense. To show how it's harder to accelerate something with more mass, picture a student and a teacher each sitting at rest in a rolling chair, facing each other. Let's also say the teacher is more massive than the student. When they both push off each other, they go rolling backwards. Notice how the student goes back much farther and faster than the teacher. The teacher accelerates less, since she is the more massive of the two objects, and it takes more force to accelerate her than it does the student. All this has to do with Newton's second law of motion, F equals ma. It says for a set acceleration, an object with more mass requires more force to get it moving at that set acceleration. As mass increases, the force required to accelerate or decelerate that mass increases as well. Now, don't you feel massively smarter?
All right, so that's what we ended up doing. So, you know, you can see how the timing allowed us to sort of cheat a few lines, like the density line. We just sort of let it play through, you know. So, you know, there's some moments here where you're allowing the viewer to kind of take in what's going on. There's not constant action going on, you'll notice. But the action is at key moments, you know, where we need to, you know, keep thinking, this is so abstract. But again, there are no right answers, but if you do it long enough, you'll sort of start to get a sense of what decisions to make. Yeah, question.
How long did that video take start to finish? Storyboarding.
I would say, John, you can help me remember all this, but the script was maybe a couple of days, revisions and so forth, and then we probably sat down for at least 4 to 6 hours, almost a whole day storyboarding it. Every scene is a complex thing, and we're not physicists, so we had to understand this stuff. We had to do some background research. About a day storyboarding, and then a total of 3 people doing the animation and illustration, and that took maybe 3 weeks. So I'd say about a month to do the whole thing. Yeah. Sure, I can do that. That's okay. We can hang out. So thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And Josh gave you guys all his info. So
yeah. Feel free to get in touch.
For today's assignment, you guys will be storyboarding one scene from your script, which is why it'll be a good idea to have some semblance of a script together. I know that you're still revising all that stuff too, which is why we're only having you storyboard one scene. And then tomorrow, Chris will help you shoot that scene. So as far as the storyboard goes, you can use these sheets, you can use PowerPoint, you can use note cards, but just upload them as images onto Tumblr. And all the assignment details are on the syllabus. I wanted to mention, this was something that I was going to show you guys during the editing portion, but you can actually storyboard in post-production after you've shot things. So this was an episode on snot that I had filmed with George. And basically after we got all of the raw footage from the first takes, these are sort of like stills from each major scene of the video. There was a portion where I did a demo of this like fake snot that I made, but I had filmed it in Katerina Ribek's lab and the sun had set. And my delivery was terrible. I was super tired that night. So there were a couple things that jumped out to us after we watched everything. One being that I'm lit very dramatically and I wanted to have more of a casual feel to my parts. And I felt like we should only dramatically light Katerina Ribek. The other was that I thought, well, how bad was that decision really? Like, is it really worth shooting again? So we shot it again because we had the time. And then it was a matter of deciding which set of footage to use. So what we're doing right now is we just put together a cut of the video using both clips. But another thing that you can do is storyboard the stills from the footage that you take day of. So here I can see how that scene looks in the context of everything else we shot. So I see that like I'm wearing a lot of blue. The whole video looks fairly blue. I look a lot more like Katerina Ribek in this set of footage than I do the rest of me, right? Like the way I'm lit in all the other scenes is really different from this. So that's what the reshot footage looks like. One, the snot demo went a lot better the second time we did it. My delivery was also a lot better. But I'm also lit a lot more flat. I actually think that the footage that we had before, it looks a lot better. Like the lighting is a lot more flattering, but it's a lot more formal and traditional. And it's hard to know how much that jumps out in the context of the rest of your video until you line up all these stills and you sort of storyboard this way. So we haven't actually finished this video. I'm in the process right now. Like this is exactly where I am with this video. But I thought I would show it to you today since we've been talking about storyboarding to show how you can do it not just in pre-production, but also after you've shot material. So we have about 20 minutes left in class. I thought that it would be good to give you guys a chance to get started on storyboarding your scene while we're around. So if you guys have questions, I'll be here until the end of class and a little bit later. You can ask Josh as long as he's around. But does anyone have any questions right now about what they need to do tonight? About storyboarding, writing?
How are your scripts? Like, what shape are they in? Are you happy with them? They still need more work?
Yeah, we can also talk about scripts right now too, because take advantage of Josh's background in writing as well.
How long are the scripts? Like, what are you shooting for? 3 minutes? 2 minutes?
Like 3 to 4 minutes. 5 is the absolute max.
Okay. And we do 150 words per minute. I don't know if that is something you guys have already talked about, but okay.
How much is one scene? So what is that?
Well, I think of scenes as sort of locations almost. So let me go back to sorry, my lap. Bye, Jamie. A scene kind of encompasses a general statement. So that the way I broke up the storyboard was I basically just did stills of each scene. You can kind of consider the whole top row as like a general scene one, which is how I originally scripted it. It was just sort of like the visual introduction to the video. But breaking it up into scenes is nice because then you'll notice like if one scene has a lot of text and then you have a scene right afterwards that's very short and you just have a series of like really quick scenes, maybe you can think about restructuring or spreading out the material a little bit more. Because like I said, what you don't want is either really long shots or really long scenes where you're not really changing that much, or if you're doing too many really quick changes. But I don't know, I don't have a good definition for like what a scene technically is.
It's kind of a unit of information. You know,
Yeah.
It's almost like when I think about writing, I think about paragraphs. Like this is a kind of a discrete unit, that's imparting a certain part of the narrative, and that's, for me, that's a scene.
Yeah. I think the way I'd scripted it, though, those 4 shots are all different locations, but I listed it as scene 1. And like where you see Professor Ribic, and then I'm right there in front of her, I also chunked that together as one scene, but then when we were editing and sort of taking note of all the clips, we denoted one as like scene 5, and then the one after is scene 5A. But in general, like it's the same sort of idea. We're in her lab in that portion. Does anyone have any other questions?
What was like the motivation in using Professor to?
So in this particular one, I wanted to highlight the research that was going on here. And I also wanted to get her involved because I knew her and I really liked her. And it was sort of like a quirky breaking down the fourth wall moment. So what happens in the scene is I set it up in the previous scene as saying like, snot is more than just this. And then it jumps to her and she finishes my sentence and she goes, it's actually X, Y, Z. And then it cuts to a wider shot revealing that I'm in front of her interviewing and you see the camera interviewing her and I'm like, and then I go, she would know, and then her name sort of pops up. Partially because we wanted to have her in the video, but we didn't want it to be really formal, like, because that shot is like a very traditional formal interview, so we wanted to make it quirky and we also wanted to sort of like informalize it. So that's why we broke out of that and I did the whole like, she would know, and then we could make that setup a little more fun.
How do you think about like the authority of the host, right? Because you can say things that are easily verifiable,
right?
But then if you're going to say something about snot that like most people don't know,
right?
Then like on whose authority do you say this? I've watched like an Alton Brown thing,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, all right, that's wrong. And like, but you're talking about other things that I want to know, and now I don't know when you're lying to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is like that's the responsibility that you have as the host is that the viewer has sort of by default placed their trust in you. I think with us, we're not going to have as much of a problem to prove because everyone knows that all the hosts are students at MIT. And in our YouTube descriptions, we say that all the scripts were fact-checked by postdoc researchers. For this, I mean, that was one of the reasons why we used her, is because I could explain her research or I could just have her say it, which I thought was like a cooler window into the world here, which is what I was talking about on the first day. Like, how do you create the window into the world that people don't have access to? I also studied bioengineering for my undergrad, so all the material for the script came from the class that I took from Professor Ribic. But I think you don't take the time in your video to introduce yourself necessarily, and maybe you should. Like, that's always something we've considered, is that something that we need to introduce into Science Out Loud? The host saying at the beginning, like, I'm Jack and I work at MIT's D-Lab. And that's sort of what we did with Lindsay's episode, just a tiny bit. But there are ways of establishing authority where you don't have to vocally do it. So in Lindsay's episode, we filmed at MIT's D-Lab, and instead of saying like, we're at MIT's D-Lab, we just spent a few seconds doing shots of the sign that said D-Lab, basically. If you guys want to see it, I can show you later. But I don't have a good answer for that, because I think that even if you're Stephen Hawking, people can question your authority to say the things you're saying. And the point of the video isn't necessarily to establish that, or at least the point of these videos. Your material should be accurate, though.
You showed us the next slide, right? And you had this glasses. Was there?
Oh, yeah. So George made me wear the goggles, partially because I think he was trying to torture me. But there are like some environmental health safety standards. And since we were technically in a lab, even though I wasn't working with anything biohazard related, the lab itself required goggles, so that's why I wore gloves and a lab coat and goggles. If you guys plan on filming in any sort of environment where that might be an issue, we'll talk about it more during producing, but just keep that in mind too. We took shots of me with and without the goggles, just in case. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll let you guys work, and we'll just sort of circulate through and see if you need any help. But again, just wanted to give you some time to make the most of the resources here. So.